So I work by anywhere. Well, I buy. And so I get I'm out here first. This time, not that I'm not a kid. I like these big things. Marshall Law in New York. No, in New York. New Rochelle. I called him.
Thank you for recognizing that from
Everybody doesn't
Do you think that I'm the one who's excuse me? What's my whole area? I was just called, I was just told by Paul that I'm expendable.
You don't get germ protection. I don't want to tell you.
He said not everyone's blindfolded.
If you count yourselves as fives, we can cut this short. 5, 10, 15, 20.
Okay, well, I have 7. Lorna will be here in just a couple of minutes, so we can go ahead and get started if that's all right.
All right, so the format of the workshop is that my team will go through the different pieces of the budget, and typically this is one of the focal points of the year and certainly our time. And it's still tremendously important, but when you get a health crisis or issues that come up, that's always going to take precedence with student safety. So I do think it would be appropriate for me to update you on where we are with COVID-19 planning. The truth is, there's nothing I'm going to say that's not in any of the communications I've sent to parents or on our website. We have a page dedicated to district planning and to information from the CDC and the Connecticut Department of Public Health. I do first want to thank Amy Kraus, who's the Director of Public Health for the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District currently. And she has been so responsive to myself and Andy when questions come up, because questions come up all the time about this person traveled, this person this person did this. And the responses we get that tie into what West Hartford Bloomfield Health District believes, as well as the Connecticut Department of Public Health, and how it fits into our planning has been excellent. So many thanks to Amy. As a matter of fact, we have 2 calls with Amy tomorrow. Andy and I will be on with her in the morning, and then there's a larger conference call later in the morning. We also have a conference call with the Education Commissioner, Miguel Cardona, tomorrow afternoon for all superintendents. And I have a meeting in the early afternoon with the Hartford area superintendents, which is the First time we've been able to get together, but I have been in constant communication with most of our Farmington area superintendent partners, talking to each other about different types of plans that we've been doing, sharing information, sharing details, and even just kind of what ifs bouncing off each other, where somebody in Simsbury had something happen, or Farmington or Avon, have you had that, and just communicating. So that's been really a godsend, that kind of open and honest communication, which really is what I've tried to do in my communication with the community, is to be as clear as possible. The difficulty is, both now and as we go forward from everybody here, is people want me to answer what ifs, and it can be frustrating, and I've explained to people, I mean frustrating for them, when I say I'm not going to go into what ifs, because anything I say all of a sudden becomes our policy, but the situation that I was picturing is never exactly the same as what the what if was that I had answered, or what may actually come. The situation is so fluid, it's changing every day, and realistically, we're being, my cell phone's next to me, and it is kind of a constant bing of information throughout the day and evening, which is good. I want to thank Greg Priest, who's the fire chief in town, is also the emergency operations coordinator, is there getting that up and running. And met with Greg last night, met with Vern Riddick, I've met with Matt Hart, communicated with Mayor Cantor, and really it's that kind of partnership and communication across areas that makes sure we are ready for any eventualities. I especially want to thank my executive team, who I delineated in the letter, but just so you all know, Andy Morrow is looking at facilities, health, and CDC guidance, and really as our chief liaison to the health district. Rick Ledwith is looking at all teacher employment issues and questions that come forward, benefits and otherwise. Rosina is doing community outreach and also looking at food insecurity issues that could arise and planning with that. Paul has been looking at all academic possibilities, outcomes, been communicating with principals, with department supervisors, and looking into what can we prepare for. Gretchen's, as always, looking at special education needs for all of our kids, depending on what situation arises. Gretchen's also looking at student absence issues on a case-by-case basis. If somebody's medically compromised or a family member is, and they have concerns about their child being in school, Gretchen's been our contact for that person. And really being able to have one of these people, and Liz Hewitt is not just doing the budget right now, but organizing all costs. Because a state of emergency has been declared, we'll be putting in for things that could be reimbursable because of the state of emergency. So that's the benefit of that. And I know from the last time with the snowstorm, that's going to be a lot of work now, both now and into the future. So thanks to everybody here. Our principals and my leadership team all did a virtual call. When was that? Friday or Monday? It seems like a month ago. Quite recently, just to make sure we're all used to doing virtual communication and getting used to that, and have been testing out with their staffs, which I greatly appreciate. Not just to see what the hiccups are, but just to increase familiarity. And I spoke to Giulio after his with a large portion of the Conard staff today, and he said, you really, it is something to have 74 people on the line saying, "Can you hear me? Can you see me?" All at the same time. So thanks to all of them for their efforts, because anytime I send something out, the truth is I get a lot of feedback, but I know they get feedback at drop-off, at pickup, and our teachers and our principals and the work that they're doing to keep people informed and ready and preparing, always preparing for the eventuality that would tax us the most, while also hoping that all these preparations are a great drill. That's what we're looking at. But there's some guidance that I sent out the other day. large events. As I said in the letter, when the Department of Public Health tells me something that's for the good of public health in the state, and also learning lessons from Washington State. And Andy and I are both friends with a superintendent just outside of Seattle, and been in communication with her and trying to learn things that have happened, and maybe from somebody that's kind of 2 weeks ahead of things, hopefully learning from her. And my heart and thoughts go out to her and her community out there. So when questions come up, because I know you'll get asked, and I realized this the other day, because my first instinct was somebody says, can't we do this? My first instinct is always, yeah, well, maybe if we do this, 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 and then like 5 minutes into the conversation, I'm like, no, it doesn't work. And so having to shift to, our inclination is no. If it's large crowds, it's no, because of public health. If there's an accommodation, then maybe that can be figured out. But for right now, we're in exercise extreme caution. There are people that think I'm going too far. If I'm going too far in the interest of keeping not just kids safe, and it's really not about the kids, although I think sometimes people forget the number of kids we have that are medically fragile in our system. And if you're out there, you'll see them every day. But it's also grandparents, parents, relatives that could be either medically compromised or just at an advanced age. And I think it's important that we all do this. The one piece I've taken off in the past 10 days was to drive up to Massachusetts to try to convince my mom to stop going to daily mass. I think it's really important that we do that with people so that they understand to not put themselves in danger. And I say that as somebody I am not a doctor, but I've spent the past 2 weeks talking to epidemiologists, public health officials, doctors at UConn, to try to get the best information I can to make decisions that are in the interest of the public good. And that's what we'll keep doing. So I thank everybody out there for their support. I thank all of you for your support, and especially my leadership group, from my executive team to all of our principals, department supervisors, our teachers that are talking to kids every day. I have 900 people out there. Sometimes one person says the wrong thing. I understand that. But people are trying right now. So hopefully this will be the most minimal impact it possibly could be. So we have 3 cases in Connecticut as of now. We still have 0 in West Hartford, but with the number of tests that have been done, which is still in the 70 in Connecticut, it's not really a surprise that we don't have numbers. So with that, I can move forward unless there's a quick question. Like I said, I can't really get into hypotheticals, but if there's a direct question of something that's happened or moving forward. All right.
I just want to actually, on behalf of the board and the community, thank you and the team for all the work that you're putting into it. I think it's noticed in the community. I've had many people say to me that they really appreciate the work that that our school system is putting into planning. So thank you.
Thanks. We appreciate that.
So you guys have heard me say, and I've been sometimes criticized, there's a time to lead and a time to follow. And this is a time to lead, and Tom is doing that from the very top. And this is not a time to follow. So I appreciate it, and this is a good example of when I say those things. So.
All right. So, as some of you are new, I'll explain a little bit about how this evening will work. I'm your host for the night. First, let me just check and make sure, does everyone have the workshop budget summary? We have extra copies. Everyone has their budget. We have extra copies of that as well. Okay? So, good? Okay. So I will go through and explain for each section. We're going to start with regular instruction elementary on page D4 and D5. I'll go through and outline the staffing changes. And every time we talk about the changes in this budget, it can get a little confusing sometimes because we talk about what the approved budget was for last year and any changes that are there from current. If we had to make adjustments based on student need, and then we talk about changes from current to our projected and our anticipated budget. And so we'll make sure that everyone tracks through the different levels, but sometimes that's what you'll hear us talking about.
If I could just one before you start, because I don't want to interrupt. In your budget is this piece, and perhaps the most important, I mean, the whole budget's important, but part 4, the data supplement, which is at the back of your budget books, those are the questions kind of that have arisen year by year that are it's kind of like the frequently asked questions section. So just so you know, when you're going things on your own, that tab in the budget is kind of a definite go-to place for a lot of answers. Tonight, it'll be itemized by page and everything else, but just when you're studying, that's an important piece. Sorry about that.
That's okay. No, it makes sense. And so I will go ahead and talk a little bit about the staffing changes. Paul and Gretchen for the various sections will talk about the programmatic impacts of those changes and the programmatic changes that are reflected in the budget that we've prioritized. And then Liz will go through and talk about the monetary adjustments and the changes for that. And then for each section, what we'll do is we'll pause, and if you have specific questions, we'll do our best to answer. And those that we can't come up with an answer at this point, we'll make sure that we note and we'll get a response back before the next meeting. Okay? All right, so as I said, we're going to start on page D4 and D5, which is regular instruction for the elementary. And for classroom teachers, we have a 2.0 decrease from current 1920 budget to our budget of 2021, which reflects 2 fewer elementary sections, again, based on our projected elementary enrollments. And in the arts and PE, we have a combined increase of 0.3 from our adopted budget to current based on scheduling needs that we had after the budget was adopted.
Programmatically, there are no major changes to how we deliver instruction at the elementary school. The one thing that I would mention, that I think we mentioned at a board meeting previously, is we are currently in our world language looking at what world language pathway we might have at Northfelt Elementary just based on a retirement and a part-time position there that may be difficult to fill part-time moving forward. So that's really the only programmatic change we're looking at the elementary level at this time, and that's all cost neutral.
And what you'll see from a budgetary standpoint in this section and in all of our sections is our salaries are going to change by a combination of our contractual step and merit increases, as well as any staffing changes that we have that we're discussing as we go through, as well as anticipated retirements, and then any actual changes in the current year expenses that we have incurred. So for regular instruction, what you will see is that there's an increase for teacher salaries of only about 1.8%. That reflects the teachers' collective bargaining agreement offset by the vacancies that we've talked about or the 2 fewer positions. You'll also see in the paraprofessional line that we have a decrease there as well, and that's just consistent with the declining enrollment and the need for fewer paraprofessionals in our elementary schools. The other changes that you'll see relate to some of our building-based budgets. When we give the different buildings their budgets, we give them an overall increase. This year it was approximately 1 to 1.5%. And then they have the discretion to budget as they need for each individual line item based upon what their needs are for the upcoming year. So as you look at the subtotal on this page for all of their instructional improvements, audiovisual software, etc., you'll see it's an increase of 1%. So while there may be variances on particular line items, it's just a reflection of what they feel their needs will be for the year. But when we look overall, the elementary schools are going up 1% in their supplies and purchase services.
Any questions?
Andy, are those 2 classrooms, are they identified at any particular school?
We, again, these are early projections that we have, but based on this, we are anticipating sections lowering at Morley and Webb Hill are our current projections for that.
The data supplement also has the class sizes that you can look at that shows what the projection, so it's usually a class moving on or a larger class graduating. And again, it's always tentative till we know the kindergarten numbers.
We okay to move on? All right. If you would, turn to pages D20 and 21. And this is middle school regular instruction. And so from a staffing standpoint, we have a net increase in .2 in math, science, language, arts, and social studies from our adopted 1920 budget to current 1920 budget based on scheduling needs for the year. We also have a 2.0 decrease in teachers from current 1920 to budget 2021, reflecting our lower enrollment at Bristow. If you remember, this is Bristow's second year of transitioning to a smaller student body, so we're capturing the savings there. We have a 1.0 increase from current 1920 to budget 2021 to reflect the addition of a math coach to support the middle schools. A 1.3 increase in world language teachers from adopted to current, again based on scheduling needs. A 0.8 decrease in world language from current to budget of 2021, reflecting lower enrollment at Bristow and fewer number of section needs overall, and a 0.8 decrease in unified art teachers from current 1920 to adopted budget, reflecting lower enrollment at Bristow. And Paul will walk you through the changes with that.
Sure. So some of the big highlights that in terms of all these changes that impact programming certainly is the addition of the math coach. We're very excited by this. I know that was something that we spoke about earlier in the year when we first had our presentation of state results. So that position we expect will do good things for us relative to our student performance overall and ongoing embedded professional development for teachers through rounds of coaching. In addition, another change to our programming is within the health rotations in 6th grade. Currently, students have 5 separate health rotations across 2 periods, so technically 10 separate rotations of unified arts, whether that's health, art, music, technology and engineering, or physical education. Only one of those is health for 6th grade. Currently, with the increased requirements from the state, we're looking to move that to 2 health rotations and offset that with 1 fewer physical education. So currently it's 3 and 1, it'll move to 2 and 2. That's an FTE neutral move. It's the same teachers, same kids, same schedule, just a change in the programming.
When we look at the recommended budget for 2021, the changes in salaries are consistent with the staffing changes that we have talked about. You'll see there's a very low increase there due to a reduction in the FTE count. And as we look at our supplies and building-based budgets, you'll see again it's an overall increase of 1.12%. You will see that there's a fluctuation between our instructional supplies, which is going up $15,700, and our supplies and fees, which is going down just about the same amount. It was just a function of where one of the schools budgeted some of their student activity money this year, but no other significant changes.
I have a question. I do apologize. It's regarding the previous page that we went over. Sorry to have us to go back. Just a question in regard to recognizing the salary for the paraprofessionals is going down, but also recognizing a lot of recognizing our population of special education and their needs increasing. Is that being accounted for elsewhere?
It is actually. The paraprofessional drop that you see there is specifically for regular education at the elementary level, and it's going down because we expect to have fewer kindergarten sections, and we have paraprofessionals who are dedicated to kindergarten. So you'll see later on when we get to Gretchen sections and the pupil services that we actually have an increase in paraprofessionals to address special education needs.
Thank you.
Of course.
The additional math coach, can you tell me how that translates to D21 and where it does? The 1 increase?
Mark, so the additional math coaches on the second line, mathematics, you'll see that there's a net increase of 0.4. Offsetting that is the reduction of half a team at Bristow and the reduction in math for Bristow. So the math coach will be serving all of the elementary schools.
So you're reducing at which schools?
We're
By
reducing at Bristow
Bristow?
because of enrollment declines.
Yep.
And then we are increasing one full FTE for a math coach that will serve all of the middle schools.
Okay, so it's a,
It's a
So
net
it's a net of
increase.
0.4.
0.4.
+1 minus .6.
This is for the new board members, this is something that comes up with middle schools, is that middle schools are a special investment because you're investing in a team structure. And that's kind of, middle schools typically year in, year out, you don't see FTE shifts because you operate on teams and it's kind of this 320, this 280, that we're still dividing into teams. This was planned out 2 years ago at Bristow to kind of right-size Bristow over a 3-year period by taking away 35 people that we place in the 6th grade there each year over 3 years with slow shifts. So the student needs are all met, but that we can shrink that into one team over time. So each year we'll see the same savings. Next year, actually, we'll see more savings than that next year because that will complete the Bristow sizing project.
Before we move on? All right, we're on a roll. If you would, please turn to pages D38 and 39, high school instruction. So for teachers and staffing, we have a 3.03 overall increase from the adopted 1920 to current 1920 based on scheduling and student needs. A 0.78 reduction from current 1920 to budget 2021 due to the elimination of the ASK program. A 1.0 increase from current to budget to meet new graduation requirements. A 0.4 increase for computer science teachers on assignment. A 0.6 reduction from the current 1920 to the budget 2021 as department supervisors teach class. And the budget for 2021 maintains the target ratio of 17.4 students at the high school.
So programmatically here, the big changes obviously are new high school graduation requirements. So you're seeing a small increase in staffing relative to looking at supervision of the high school mastery. We're budgeting that in as a 0.4, looking at some, basically affording some time to supervise that at both Conard High School and Hall High School. In addition, as you heard about at our recent REACH presentation, we're looking at how do we provide for arts classes, which are part of the new graduation requirements for REACH students. We're maintaining what we're doing with world language, and we're also looking at supervision for REACH. The elimination of the ASK program is something that has been budgeted separately. It doesn't fall in the actual staffing for Hall High School. It is a historical program similar to REACH that was designed to help support dropout prevention, and we've allowed that to maintain. Even the teacher had retired and then agreed to continue to essentially work at Hall on a part-time basis so long as we still saw the viability of that program, even opposite the dual sort of purpose of the REACH program, and B, until such time that student interest had kind of waned. I'm aware that there's a very limited number of students who would otherwise be continuing, and we feel that we can program for them either within REACH specifically, or if there are FTEs within the Hall programming that we would need to do it, but we don't need to program for it separately outside of regular high school FTEs. Other than that, I don't know if there are no other like large programs. We're going to talk about department supervisors in a later section. So I'll address it at that time.
From a budgetary standpoint, the lines that are affected by these changes for our staffing changes is first our teacher salaries, line number 5112. You'll see that that changes by both our contractual increases and the increases in FTEs that we discussed. Our technical support salaries, account number 5116, that's where we've budgeted 0.4 for our high school mastery, and so you'll see the increase there. From a supplies and overall purchase service standpoint, the high schools have an increase of 2.9%. Most of these are just a reallocation amongst lines. The one that does show a little bit larger increases are instructional supplies, account number 5510. It's going up about 11,000. That has to do with tech ed supplies for both our automotive, our manufacturing, and our woodworking programs, some needs that they have this year. The other item that you will see is on line 5640, our equipment. There's an increase of approximately 12,000 in equipment that has been requested. That's primarily for physical education replacement equipment at Conard and also for science equipment, LabQuest and centrifuges at Hall.
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating the last thing that you said?
Certainly, about the equipment? Yep, of course. So the line number 5640, the equipment that we see, the increase is due to replacement physical education equipment at Conard and then replacement science equipment at Hall.
Can you walk me through the 0.78, the math on that? Like, how did we get to that number? First column, second bullet. Yes.
So currently Ask is co-taught by two teachers, part-time, couple of different sections. The fact that it's a 0.78 versus a 0.8, I honestly...
Equivalent, it's the equivalent.
Oh, it's just the equivalent based on when you average out their salaries. Okay, I understand. When we're talking about FTEs in general, we're probably using an average salary. So when you take the number of years one person is on and the number of years the other, instead of being, say, a 0.8, averages out to a 0.7.
That makes sense, thank you.
Yep.
I think it's a little confusing because I think we're receiving mixed information on enrollment numbers. And I wanted, if you could comment
No,
on
I
that.
think that people are sending information
Yes.
that isn't, no, because people have challenged, you said there's only 6 people. There's 6 people returning in the program. We didn't recruit because I don't anticipate us running the program next year. The reason I don't anticipate us running the program next year is because I believe the programs are done and shouldn't be run next year. Gretchen, do you believe the programs are done and shouldn't be run next year? Paul, do you believe the programs are done and shouldn't be run?
I do, and we have openings at Reach.
Andy, do you believe the same? So, and the key difference with Ask is you're funding a program separate from Conard and Hall, because they get an FTE allotment. So now Hall gets an extra FTE allotment. Now, we have to be equitable between our schools. We are, but the only time we're not equitable is when we're making up with a more significant need at other places, like our inter-district magnet schools, Charter Oak and Smith, where because there's a higher incidence of English as a second language, because there's a higher incidence of free and reduced lunch, we're doing more to make up those shifts. With Conard and Hall and Ask, we're doing the exact opposite. We're funding the school with lower free and reduced lunch numbers, with lower ESOL numbers, and we're funding it at a higher rate than we are the other school. It's not equitable. So if it's going to stay in, we need to actually add to the budget to make Conard whole with that too, would be my strong opinion on this. And the other thing is, so I guess this is the other thing, we let our high school principals decide the programmatic needs when we said in their FTEs. So if you were to cut this, and Dan Zatoun decided this is a program we need to have, he could still allocate it within his programmatic needs for all high school, and the two schools would be equal, and that would be meeting the needs of all students.
So thinking about this, the kids and what they receive in the program, which I understand, if the kids in that program were to shift over to REACH, is what they're getting the same? Like, would their needs be being met?
It's not the
'Cause I
same.
think that's
because
the-
the programs they're not the same. It's, to say any two programs are exactly the same, that's not really the case. But there are openings in REACH. So if this is a program to keep kids in school, then there are options, and certainly REACH is one of those options, that we have seen the success of the REACH program. So I would argue that that's strong, and I'll let Andy and Paul jump in. But the other part is that Conard used to have the Connections program, which was the counterpoint to ASK, which was basically the same thing. And that stopped existing 13, 14 years ago. And Conard never got the replacement, but those kids were programmed for within the school, both with social workers and with perhaps modified classes, modified schedules, or their school counselors meeting with them, making sure that what they have is appropriate for their needs, which is what we would do for all those kids at Hall. If REACH, I don't want to say that, well, we're going to take all those 6 kids or 7 kids or 5 kids, if my number's wrong now, I don't think it is, I'm pretty sure it's 6, or the 6 that were going to come into it next year, we'd program for those kids appropriately, just like we do at every other school. Just like we do at Conard, for those 6 kids that must exist at Conard too. And we're scheduling appropriately for them there. I don't know if you want to add.
I would just add that I think that it's important to remember that we make every decision making sure that we can meet the needs of students. And I think in conversations that we've all had as a leadership team with the administration at Hall, with Shelley Solomon, who is uniquely insightful into REACH, working with those students over the years and so forth, that the feeling is that the students who have been identified for that program, the needs can be met either at Hall or through that program, through REACH.
So if the community is processing that information, thinking the Board of Ed is going to cut a program designed to help support the most vulnerable, high-need kids, the high-risk kids, then the response is that there are
other options
They're not
that are
just being
designed to meet exactly. No one is being left. No one is being cast adrift. There are multiple other options, both at Hall and within the district, to address the individual student needs.
Okay. So then, if we're processing this, we're thinking about what you just said and the fact that Hall could decide to keep it if they felt they wanted to keep it within the structure of their own budgeting.
Correct.
Those are
correct.
the 2 salient points for us. Okay.
Correct.
So the counter argument from the community would I would imagine, would be, would their needs be being met in a group setting still, or would they be all individualized?
Sure. So at a REACH program, it's very similar, even smaller classes, I want to say, than ASK. They do have a dedicated social worker that works there that holds group with them weekly. They do have a TA support in there that works with kids that maybe if they're in an individualized setting. They have more supervision. It's a more built-out program that, so the notion that kids who are most at risk, if I have a higher degree of being at risk, REACH is actually a more defined program for that level of need. And that, I think that's the difference when you talk programmatically. What are the differences between the 2 programs? One's for, students that have less or more moderate need versus high need. And it's how the programs grew over time. And just the notion that kind of once you had one, we kind of at Conard, as Tom indicated, it got let go after a time period, and at Hall it did not, and it had a very strong following, and therefore, we wanted to honor that because it did great things for kids. We can continue to do those great things for kids at REACH.
Okay.
I don't mean this to minimize the ASK program at all, but the ASK program is Jim Solomon, who is a great teacher who has helped countless people over the years. And if he wants to keep working in the district as a teacher, I'm sure if we have overage, he could come back as a retired teacher still. just not with a specialized program that only exists there, that's redundant with other programs that we've created.
Because I think the feedback that we're getting is that the community is very tied to the historical impact of that program.
And I don't minimize
Thank
that,
goodness.
that program,
Yeah.
program has existed for decades.
Yeah.
And I want to make it clear, I am in no way impugning what that man has done for so many people over the years, and that program has done for so many kids over the years. But it's like anything else, that over time, we're going to shift how we do things. And we've built out other programs that are, in some ways, more thorough, more all-encompassing, and that with that, some programs shift over time. We've had programs in special education that when we moved away from them, the uproar was intense. We had individual programs in elementary schools that we moved away from about 10 years ago, and each school that had one that was a program school was very upset to lose it as we shifted, but that was the shift that was made at the time because it was appropriate. It's not that what happened before in those classrooms wasn't good. It was great. It's just, okay, but now this is the model that we're moving towards. And so,
Let me add
Go
one
ahead.
thing, because, what you said just struck a thought that might help. As dropout prevention programs, they both are serving at-risk students. The reason for our shift in this case, especially as you think about increased graduation requirements, is the ASK program was really dedicated to humanities. It was really dedicated specifically to literacy, to English language arts and social studies. In the REACH program now, who's keeping tabs on those kids relative to whether or not they got that world language credit? Who's keeping tabs whether or not they got 9 credits under STEM? Who's keeping tab on those kids whether they got that 1 credit within the arts? We can offer that within the REACH program. That is not how we're currently designed in the ASK program. And so relative to serving the needs of the kids and just relative to the notion that both the timing for graduation requirements and the fact that there is a low number of kids who would otherwise be carrying forward that we can program for without substantial change. And then as we recruit based on, and recruit's not necessarily the word, as we identify kids who might need that level of support, we identify and program for them in the area where we can better service their needs individually and their holistic needs programmatically.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the sidebar because I know it's something that our team of 7 is going to spend a lot of time thinking through, so the information is helpful.
Just a couple comments. And just for the record, make sure everybody's thinking about it. Sean kind of just touched on it. So we did get a flurry of communications, as you may or may not be aware. People, kind of like you're saying, with the historical support of this program. But when I left the last meeting and it was mentioned how there's only 6 kids, it kind of influences us one way. And then Mr. Solomon, as you know, wrote a letter to us saying that part of the normal process there's an extraordinarily large amount of seniors this year, I guess, right? And so his comment to us was, well, part of our normal process year to year is recruitment, basically, right? Or evaluation, and that they're identifying 40 to 50 potential candidates for this program. So I feel like we can't lose track of that.
That's just not true. 40 or 50 kids in the program?
It's in his letter.
Yeah, you couldn't program it with the number that you have there. So I can tell you,
What part isn't
you can
true?
either pay Jim Solomon to sit here and give you information, or you can pay me to sit here and give you information.
So
I'm telling you right now, there are 6 people in this program going forward. Just the notion that the word chosen to be used is recruit. Recruit.
that's my word. I'm
That's the word
paraphrasing.
used in the letter.
Is it? Okay, I just.
That's the word that's been used to me.
Okay.
Recruit. So we're recruiting kids for a program that you're funding that Concord doesn't have the same opportunity. So if we want to do that, we should create the same program for Concord.
So anyway, I just was kind of feeling like that was misleading because whether it's
No, but
recruiting.
you're insinuating that I was misleading.
Well, I'm confused, right? I mean, you said 6, and then we have someone who's in the program saying we could have 40 or 50 kids.
How many
So-
kids are in the program next year?
Well, it's part
6
of the,
kids returning.
Well, no, Tom. Like, it seems like I'm just going off of what it's.
How many
being
kids
said.
are we taking something away from that we need to program for? 6.
That's not what I'm saying right now. Okay, so I'm just trying to make sure we're making an informed decision. It's very clear where you are on it. And I'm
It's
not
not,
saying,
remember, it's not just me. It's everybody on the executive team and the principal of the high school.
that's fine. So I'm just trying to make sure we understand that it sounds like there's a review process, if that's a less inflammatory word.
So if I can interject,
Yeah.
this might help, I don't know. In terms of identifying students, there are 6 students through their course selection who have gone onto the computer and asked to be part of this program for next year at Hall. But in addition to that, the other thing that we have done is we work between Conard and Hall through the counseling departments to identify students who are at risk in general. And those students are typically recommended then to put in applications for the REACH program. And then interviews happen and all the rest. So the identification of kids who, at that level has happened. We have names, we have kids that are moving in, and we have openings. So I think that's part of, with any class, when we don't have a class that fills up, we do go ahead and say, how can we generate more interest, and we want to fill this, because we're obviously not going to run any class under strength. In terms of where we are for needs for students, we're talking needs for students, we have those processes in place, and they're already underway, and many of them, like anytime we're looking for students with needs, those processes continue. But the big difference I want to point back, so I wanted to mention that, because both sides of town, Hall and Conard, have actively identified kids, and yet the course requests are where they are for this point in time. The big difference I go back to is not just is the kind of wraparound services that we can provide at REACH, because we're looking at the entirety of their program and not just a part of their program. And it's difficult, because I understand we've done an exceptional job with students in the Ask program. We have exceptional teacher in that program who has come back. He's been retired a while. He's come back every year to do this for us on a part-time basis, and he's exceptional. And that is, at the end of the day, that's the difficulty of, we're facing a similar situation at the elementary school, as I was referencing earlier. When you have someone who's exceptional at what they do, but they're doing it on a part-time basis or a small basis, and then when that shifts, there is a mourning process, because you feel like you're losing something great. But we have another, you saw a presentation and saw the phenomenal comments of students. We do have something great in place that is ready to service the needs of our kids. So I just want to make sure that's coming out, because at the end of the day, that is what people are worried about, I think, when they reach out, and we need to let them know we hear that, we don't dismiss how great the program has been, and we have an equally great program ready to help service kids.
Okay, so, thank you. Just trying to get a little more clarification or just thoughts. So, it was, how I read the letter, and I'm not taking it as gospel, Tom. So I'm just trying to understand, make sure that we're all on the same page. So I interpret it as the normal process is it's an annual review to try and see where kids would fit into that program. And so that isn't changing from year to year. Am I understanding that correct? Like every year, like you said, there's looking at placing people into the Ask program. So there's 6 right now, but that number could increase, whether they would go to the REACH program or wherever. Is that the normal process that takes place?
I would say, Rob, that the normal process in any school, whether it's middle school, high school, or elementary school, is certainly at this point to go ahead in the spring and to assess student needs. Mm-hmm. And based then on student needs and the growth that's been made over the current year, or the lack of growth over a current year, what we do is when we sit down and at the schools and look at student needs, we look at then the available interventions and the available programs. What we're saying is that Reach is an available program that we feel is a better fit to meet the student needs. No one's student needs are not going to be met
I understand.
by cutting this program. It's simply a different delivery system, and I get that it's difficult to let something go. And as Tom said, Jim's a great, fantastic teacher who has influenced countless kids over the years.
I don't know Jim that well personally, so I'm not here on his behalf. But I just to get a simple yes or no, like the year-to-year process with this ASK program has not changed. Like the way it was described in the letter is that, like what you're saying, like just with the REACH program, like you look to.
But I would argue that that's not a year-to-year with the ASK program. That's what we do across the board, is we identify student needs.
Right.
And some students' needs are met inside the classroom. Some student needs were met by the ASK program. Some student needs were met by REACH. What we're saying is that we believe that, and Hall believes that the students' needs can be met with alternative programs.
With REACH, right? So I'm just trying to get a yes or no. So it sounds like to me that, if for whatever reason that the board decided to continue this program, and I mean, I haven't made a decision. I assume none of the other folks have. I'm just trying to understand that there would be a process then, just based on your saying, where the ASK program would identify kids, so there would be potentially an influx of kids that would take the program beyond the 6, correct?
It's not about kids taking the program. If the board decided to continue the funding for that, then Hall obviously would have to decrease other places within their group to support that. But that then would be, as they were then looking at alternatives for students, they would, if they felt that it was appropriate for some students, they would enroll some students in that.
Okay. So just so I'm clear with you guys, that's my, I don't know if you're looking at it differently, that was my take on it, that, based on that letter, it's just like any program, there's a review, and then there's an analysis, and then there's if there's, kids that fit in the program, then that number would increase. That's all. I'm not saying that we should keep it or not, but.
There's one other piece, and I get it, Rob, and if I'm short, trust me, I'm tired and I apologize. I blanch at a teacher that wrote, because there is one thing to remember here, okay? A teacher wrote, by the way, I didn't get that email, so I don't know what was sent to you. So that's inappropriate.
I thought he said he sent it to you.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that's the same thing. He sent me another communication, but I've also been a little busy this week. But part 2 of this is you're allowing somebody to recruit, that their recruitment creates their position. Where else do we do that? By recruiting kids, now I've got 40, now I have a position for next year. Because it's not us recruiting and saying, these are our ASK kids. It's that recruitment and that partnership. And I'm not saying he's doing it for sleazy means. He's not at all. But that's the other part of this when we talk about recruitment and putting kids in the program. The continuation of the program continues the employment. And that's the difficulty of talking about something that's as small as a 0.78, 0.8 position. I mean, there's an argument to be made that if this weren't ever separated as a budget issue, which it is because it's separate from Conacher Hall, if this was just within Conacher Hall, you'd never know about it. Because these are the decisions we're making all the time about positions. Because there's going to be less Spanish positions at the middle school next year. But we don't let a 6th grade teacher who says, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job, go to the 5th graders and say, we need more Spanish kids for next year. You know what I'm saying? That's the kind of piece that is unique to this. And I'm not suggesting malfeasance. I'm just suggesting the reality.
So I wish I'd never used the word recruit, because I feel like that's gone down a rabbit hole. And just for clarification for the new board members, I'm pretty sure I'm on record a couple of years ago saying we get rid of this program or questioning it. So, I'm just trying to, I'm trying to toe a line here. And it was just because we got so much response, and then, we got that letter, and I was like, oh, I just want to make sure, especially since we had some new folks on the board, and that is no way an impingement on you guys, because I remember when it was my first year. That there was just clarification, because my concern was, well, okay, and kind of to what you said earlier, these are 2 different programs. So, and I mean, I was really impressed with that REACH presentation. Those kids were awesome. I mean, they were talk about inspirational. So it's it seems that everything you guys said made sense. And I'm not saying that you're wrong or anything like that. It was just as a board member, like we get feedback from the community, so I just figured in a public forum we should talk about it, even just for the record. So if maybe it's covering my butt a little bit. Like if people watch it, be like, geez, the board never even responded to all our messages or anything. It's like, see, we talked about it.
It's completely fair. And I know I'm not making friends with 30 people or however many wrote to save a program that's in existence. And again,
Probably not.
I'm not questioning the program. I'm not questioning what it's done over the years.
Yeah.
I'm saying I have a number that I have to come in at.
Yeah.
I have to
Totally understand.
guard the funds of West Hartford, make sure that we're as efficient as we can be. So that's all we're trying to do.
And I respected that you're doing that. And I was like, when you proposed this, I was kind of like, wow. I'm like, I don't even have to argue this one this year. I'm like, he's just getting rid of it. He's like preempting me or whatever. But, taking a little more time to be thoughtful about it in all seriousness, I was like, wow, and I've heard about the program for years too anyway. And then you read all those things, you're like, this is a really amazing program, and kind of your point, like an amazing individual, great stuff going on, and you're like, so I mean, there's all these things going on. And the REACH program is so great and everything. Anyway, so all right, so I'm done with that. But then I had one other thing I just was curious about. When you mentioned, there's principal discretion, so if the principal of Hall wanted to add this, can you think historically, being a history teacher, has a principal ever done something like that, like a lot, where they'll do that?
Yeah, I can talk. We've done double maths at different schools where kids need extra support, so we create a little program for math.
Okay.
Where they're taking 9th and 10th grade math at the same time instead of just taking one, and we'll organize a class around. I know, Paul, you can probably think of 10.
I mean, a simple example, an AP Spanish literature that's run at Hall, very much at Conard for a number of years. Last year, it had, it has low enrollment because it's essentially almost like a 7th year of the language if you count the AP language courses, the 6th year. And we try to sustain the program because it's so exceptional and the kids do so well. You have to get a certain number of kids, and so we're getting juniors and seniors into it. Last year, we didn't have enough, so it didn't run. This year, currently, they were able to rebound that, and it has run. And it's always those things of courses and sections. You need enough kids so that you can justify running a section and having the expenditure of the FTE, and you don't, so whether it's math type programs and remediation type things that we do, Gretchen's going to talk a lot about COTOTs and all these things that we do. We're always starting with what are the basic needs of our students, what are the things that we definitely want to protect, and when we can't do it, are we meeting the needs of kids, and can we do it a more efficient way or a more economical way? With the need to add FTEs in at REACH in order to satisfy the graduation requirements, it kind of just makes sense. We have to invest in that program in the first place. It's meeting the needs of kids. So it sort of just becomes it's time potentially where we've run parallel programs for a significant amount of time. We don't have the need to necessarily run the parallel program at this any further, and we don't think it's going to. We think the impact is going to be on kids is going to be something that we can address in other ways to minimize or really eliminate any impact to their programming.
One other quick question on that. So if the principal of Hall wanted to do this, where would it come out of his budget?
So we have an FTE meeting coming up where we're looking at all the different course requests across all the departments, and just based on the budget and the number of students that the high school serves, they're given a planning number, and they would have to essentially cut from other places in order to run this program, which is essentially co-taught, so it's twice as expensive on the FTE side and lower enrollment.
So you look at we have 14 sections of American government. That means if you go to 13, it goes from 23.2 kids to 24 kids. So you'd make that decision with 4 different classes. I guess my point is Conard's already doing that because Hall's getting an extra 0.8. So Conard's making those 4 less classes than Hall has because of this. That's the comparison.
I think the comparison thing, I think we need to a little bit be careful on that, because the Conard and Hall aren't exact in anything.
They're both allocated FTs based on 17.4 kids.
Yeah, but I'm talking about, like, you said they had 0.83 more, but when they have shop class, like for the auto shop, and they were the first to have computer science.
That doesn't matter, because that still comes out of your basic, you do the math, you divide the total number of course selections by averaging 17.4, and that's what they're both allotted. So Conard picking a course out that they have that Hall doesn't, that's still coming out of that big number. This is a creation of the board going completely to Hall.
Oh, well, we created this years ago?
Decades ago, yeah.
Well,
Not you.
let's be clear on that. So how has this particular program changed in the last 20 years?
It's gotten significantly smaller.
Programmatically,
FTs
has it changed?
FTs have come down. I know, Gretchen, you were at Hall with the program.
I think it's important to note that it's a short period of time during the day. It's not a full-day program, and so the students that are enrolled, they're in that classroom for basically a double period block. And so, and in that, they're getting both subjects. They're getting a history and an ELA credit. And so the number of students have changed, but also our students' needs have changed. So, that program may have served a certain student at one point 10 years ago. Well, that student may need a different level of service. And so because we provide programming on a continuum, they're getting what they need somewhere else. And so we've also expanded our level of support services across the schools. And so we continue to be able to meet. Some students currently enrolled may find the answer at Reach, but they may find the answer at Hall with the supports that are being provided there. We'd have to look at each student individually.
I just, as someone new to the board, just to be transparent, we were bombarded with emails today, one after the other. And I guess for me, and I read each and every one of them, and I took the time, and the take home for me from those letters was that they were nostalgic. They were all alumni of this program. They were people that had relationships with this particular teacher. He officiated somebody's wedding. I mean, there is this personal relationship connection with this individual. And I felt that most of the letters were in support of him as a person and a teacher, not necessarily as how Ask functions in the here and now, how it functioned, how it saved their lives, how it made them go on and get college degree, be a postgraduate degree, which I can appreciate, having worked in a therapeutic day school. I see those changes every day. The flip side for me is just last week at the meeting, your passion, Tom's passion for special ed and meeting kids where they're at and what they need is so apparent and overwhelming for me as a parent, as a professional, as a board member. So I do think there's some level of trust that we have to put in you and the decisions you make, as well as your team. So just kind of like with the I'm losing thought. What was the grounds, all of the field lights, what is that called? No.
Yeah, the CIP.
The CIP. I went through that, I reviewed it. At the end of the day, I don't know construction, I don't know roofs, I don't know any of that, so I have to put my trust in you, right? And I feel the same way about this issue. I feel like if you're telling us that you can program for these kids, knowing your level of commitment to special ed, I think that we have to trust in you. And I will say that there was not, and I don't know if I'm going to end up with 40 more emails after this meeting, if anybody's watching, but I did not receive a single letter from someone who graduated from this program within the past 18 years. I mean, that's my take home from this, and it doesn't take anything away from the program, it doesn't take anything away from Mr. Solomon, but in terms of meeting the needs of West Hartford students who require special ed or any kind of added support, I don't know how much this program would give above and beyond what we have to offer them. Just my thoughts, sorry.
Well, for full disclosure and the audience listening, the emails were Facebook generated from one particular friend group. So that's an age group thing as well. So it was very targeted, and I would venture to guess that anyone that's been in the REACH program in the last, between now and 18 years, probably don't even know that we're discussing this. That just so you're for edification.
One thing that we've learned from Jim Solomon and those of us who've had the opportunity to watch the program is how important relationship is, and I think you alluded to that. I mean, he has an incredible relationship with students. We replicate that in other parts of our district. We're proud of the relationships that we have with students, and while we acknowledge that he's done incredible work, we'll continue to do that work and forge those relationships with those students because we know that's what's going to make the difference.
I just want to say real quick, I was just looking at the letter why people were talking, the recruit was my word. It's not in the letter. I don't want Mr. Solomon to be like, that wasn't me. And it's my nature and my business. We're always recruiting, so that's my fault. So just want to be clear on that so that it's on record. And then it's funny, I had a different take from you from reading. I mean, I kind of to Mark's point, I think it was a select group of people, which is why you always I think we have to be careful as board members when we get these letters, because it's unfairly sometimes limited based on someone's passion to get our attention, for better or for worse. And so I found those anecdotal stories very compelling, and it is a tribute to that man that, I mean, he's obviously a treasure for the district. And I've heard about his reputation at Hall from multiple people. So I hope in no way he feels that anyone was impugning him here tonight, because I mean, it just seems like this is for the new members. It's I guess at the end of the day it should be a cost analysis, and I mean, like, well, right, can we afford to continue it, which is what the argument was a couple of years ago that I was wondering when I was kind of arguing on the other end. And I know it actually predated me a year or two before that, where the board talked about it, and there was passionate people then too. So I think it's something I think we should all marinate on and think about. There's a lot of good programs. There's a lot of things in the budget that cost a little bit that add up to a lot. And this is just one of those programs. And it's like, well, is the bang for the buck there, being a business guy? And I mean, I think there's arguments that it is warranted to continue. And that sometimes you have more than one way of getting things done. Where the program, the REACH program is a fantastic program, but there's more than one way to do it sometimes. So Tom has a very tough job. He's trying to make adjustments, and you got to respect that. As a board, we have to decide whether or not we think this is one to do, and I'm sure we will.
Just a quick question for clarification, or just to conceptualize. In terms of the three programs that we're referring to, ASK, REACH, and STRIVE, is it correct to assume that of those three, ASK has the longest standing history in terms of existence?
I did a little research on my own about STRIVE, and to the best of my knowledge, by going through old staff phone directories, it started in 1995 as the off-campus program. So that's as far back as I can go.
I believe REACH indicated my recollection from a report the other day. I want to say 1989? No.
REACH is 99.
99.
Yeah.
Okay.
So ASK has seniority, is it fair to say?
I would say ASK
and I
has
think
certainly existed longer than those.
Correct.
So with that, is it also fair, not looking for a specific number per se, but recognizing the young people that are being serviced through Ask, through Reach, and through Strive, which, putting all of this aside, certainly glad that we have the passion and recognizing and wanting to serve the needs of our young people. In terms of those programs, and those students that have been a part of the program, each respective program over the years, is it fair to say or assume that more students have been serviced collectively between Reach and Strive over the years since inception?
I want to say yes, because I don't have that number, and I saw the inquiry come in late today, and it's something I can bring back to the next workshop. But I think the point that that I think you're trying to make is part of the nostalgia and really part of the love and reverence of the Ask program is based on the history of it and the notion that after that was, I can remember the Connections program when I was a teacher at Conard High School. I can remember a team of, I believe it was 4 full-time teachers who worked on that side of town with at-risk students before we had the alternative high school program, Reach. Reach, when Connections went away, I don't know exactly how long it was in between when Reach began, but the Ask program was continued, probably in large part because of the effectiveness of Jim as a teacher. And it's continued, as he said, he's worked through his retirement and come back. And of course, the program has gotten smaller because it's parallel to our alternate high school program. So I thoroughly recognize, and I would have only phenomenal things to say about Jim and the service he's given to us in the district. I recognize folks who have been through it. What they haven't been through is they haven't been through our other programs. So I don't know what to say other than it's not like we're cutting a service to our kids. We are changing. We have changed, and now we're sort of just finishing off that part of it and saying, hey, this has existed over here for 30 years with Reach, and that's our program for servicing these students at need.
And I understand, and I don't mean to put you on the spot wanting specific numbers, certainly no. It was a question asked late. I guess more so just trying to conceptualize, what I'm hearing is that as Ask has been going on, concurrently other programs like Reach and Strive have been going on as well.
I want to be a little cautious in comparing Reach and Ask with Strive, because in order to go to Strive, a student qualifies under IDEA. So it is a different population of students, and so it wouldn't be one option to go to the other programs or Strive. Students go to Strive because they meet a certain criteria. So it's not exactly comparing apples to apples.
And as we're talking about it as a program, and I'll go back to program versus person, because we never talk about people here, we talk about programs, okay? And unfortunately, this melds together because of letters and communication. But there's a reality, is that the teacher that now runs the program, that has run the program for decades, retired in 2014 and keeps deciding to come back, which means the program keeps existing. If one year he decided he didn't want to come back, the program wouldn't exist anymore. I mean, I can tell you that directly, and you wouldn't get 40 letters telling you we have to hire people to do that program, because even to show even further about program versus person, when you're retired, you can't teach more than 0.5. So the program is now even shortened, and that's when we say, has the program been the same? No, it hasn't, because it had to get smaller because of this. So and like I said, if language arts, typically if we had an English language arts position, which is kind of the typical case when somebody retires, and then we have a 0.2 or 0.4, we have a retired person who wants to come back for that, that's great. We'd love to bring that person back. If we had an English language arts opening in the district, be happy to bring Jim back to teach that class and have the same impact on those kids that he's having now. But that's the difference between this being a real program. That's really where we have to be careful. And that's where I blanch with the notion of it being a program as much. because it wouldn't continue to exist otherwise.
Thank you, thank you.
So this might be long, and I apologize because I'm the type of person that likes to just put all my cards on the table and you can answer them as you want, and that way you'll know where I stand, completely transparent, and you can correct me where I'm wrong, and I'm happy to change my mind on anything. So I've got some notes here, and I'm going to go through, and a lot of it touches on what everybody else has already talked about. But I guess it's one of those things where if you know, the more you know, the less you know in this case, because I've heard a lot of statements today that just kept confusing me more. And first of all, I want to say I have a lot of respect for what you've done and how hard this is, and none of this is easy, as Rob has reminded us that we have to make some hard decisions. And I'm happy to make some hard decisions, but I have to work through these thoughts first. So if you can go down this journey with me, because I always like to think of things from the other side first, like with school start times. Convince me that why we start where we do is the best time to start. Why that time? And with this, I asked myself, if I told you that we could get what used to be Jerry Kogan and Jim Solomon, two suckers, to come in for 0.4 each with no health benefits to act as a tier 2 program, I would say that's a pretty good deal. You're not going to find that much less, especially with the experience. And now it's just Jim. And just putting this out there, I'm probably the most biased person in the room because I've known Jim for a long time. So keep that in mind, that when I talk, I've known him
That is a
for
fair
a long
question,
time.
Sean. In all
Yeah.
honesty, it's a
Yeah.
fair question,
Completely.
the appropriateness of this whole line.
Completely.
You used to coach with him and under.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, he's obviously a mentor for me. He's the district's longest serving employee from what he's told me a few times. But I used to coach for him. Won a state championship with him and a few league championships, and I value his respect and his advice. So, but when I do this, I'm wearing my board hat, and ultimately I want to do what's best for students. So if we could clarify my thoughts here, I don't mind voting to, or proceeding with canceling the ASK program. I just want to put that out there. But I got to work through this first. So hopefully you don't mind going through this with me, because you got to go through it eventually, right? Let's get to it. Here we go. So to me, when a teacher has an issue with a student, they implement some tier 1 strategies first, and what ASK would be is a tier 2. And from my knowledge, a REACH is a tier 3. So what we'd be doing is, in my just, again, flyby observation of this, is putting kids from a tier 2 either back into a tier 1 or up, or wherever, to a tier 3, which doesn't make sense to me, because if they were in a tier 2, that would be what's best for them, and that's very confusing for me. So my initial question was, do we have other tier 2s? Does Conard have a tier 2? Why would we go right to a tier 3? So that's very confusing.
So let's pause and get an answer to that.
Sure.
Okay. So, for those of you new or listening at home, we'll talk about what tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. A tier 1 intervention is an intervention that's going to take place right in the classroom. Tier 2s and 3s are typically additional interventions, and the difference between a tier 2 and a tier 3 is the intensity and the duration. I'm going to quibble a little bit on the description of ASK as a tier 2. It definitely can be thought of as less intense because it is only a limited portion of the school day, but the duration of the ASK program is for a full year. I fully think that if a student is not going to be in what I would otherwise call, mainstream DLA, kind of luck of the draw English class and social studies class, and there's a differentiated curriculum, that's tier 3. That's different programming for the length of the year. But your key point is the essential point is it's a little bit less of an intensive program relative to the impact, because I'm still at my home school, and so on and so forth. So that part I get. Why? And it's a difficult thing, because the last thing I want to do is paint to anyone that this, and Tom said the same, everyone said the same thing, that this is any reflection on Jim. Jim's an outstanding teacher, and that's, I think, why we're having this conversation. We're not having the conversation on program merits as much as we are on the quality of an educator. And no one's going to question that. That being said, we do have Tier 2 interventions to support students at both Hall and at Conard, and those interventions are typically going to be delivered, whether that's through a group, something we bring the bridge in for, or even if that's just through their school counselor, the social worker, school psychologist. That's going to be something that they're going to either do during a free period the kid has, potentially if they needed to, if it came to that, pull out from a certain class for a short period of time, and that Tier 2 is sort of like a booster shot to get you back and get you ready. It's lower intensity, short duration. We have the ability to do that. We have the structures in place to do that. In fact, since the inception of all these programs, we've changed a lot of our structures, even our school counseling program, moving it to ninth grade counselors so that they're right in there dealing with like those kind of transition issues versus 10, 11, 12. So hopefully, like when you look holistically at all the different programming and the changes that we've made over the course of a number of years, it sort of starts to demonstrate why we feel that comprehensively at the high school, we can separate out who can we service, to Gretchen's point earlier, who can we continue to service at Hall through some Tier 2 interventions, and then they're going to be okay in the program that they're in, and who can we service, who needs that more intensive, same length of duration program at Hall, at Reach. And if I can come to why do we think that for students who need that Reach is going to be better, convince you on why something's better. It's really that change in graduation requirements and the ability to provide those wraparound services and have eyes on not just my literacy and not just my social studies, but my world language, but all of those other pieces, and have the group is in there as well, which you were able to create in the Ask program because you had two teachers, they were co-teaching. One, if I needed to pull a small group over here and have a powwow about an issue, or if I wanted to have a meeting at the beginning of class because I have a longer block of time, I've got a 90-minute, so I can do a 10-minute conversation on what just happened in the news, or is anybody feeling anxious about this coronavirus thing, and so on and so forth. I could do that. I can do that as well in Reach, and we have the clinicians and the counselors to be able to do that at Hall as well. We have plenty of kids that are kind of on a watch list, and those interventionists will go in and touch base with kids as needed when we know of some, when we're worried about an issue.
Just a quick question, just from with you describing Tier 2, is it fair to say then, based off of what was described, that as of now, it is inequitable in terms of the provisions provided to Hall and Conard, based off of the FTEs for Ask and what's not given at Conard right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have counselors, clinicians, all the rest, so those services exist. We have the Ask program at Hall and not at Conard. The parallel program at Conard was the Connections program, and that went away 2007. So we haven't had a separate program like this tied into the delivery of curriculum for a significant amount of time.
So from that perspective, it's not equitable at this time?
Correct.
So you being the math guy, right? So there's 1,516 people at Hall. 0.78 of this is a FTE. How does that, when I do the math, it's 0.000514, and it's a rounding error on everybody's checkbook. So how would it change the number of 0.78 when you talk about equitable between Hall and Conard with 1,516 kids? The math doesn't work for me on the equitable. We're talking
You're right.
17.4, not programs.
All of these are equitable numbers, so it's really simple. Hall gets 4 more classes than Conard does. So yeah, you're right. In a $175 million budget, if we want to move on, because this position isn't going to make or break the budget. If you guys keep it in, it's not going to make or break the budget. The dollars here are not the big issue. The big issue is kind of the message that it sends about our programs. That's all.
and we're talking you're talking programs, but I'm talking FTEs, because you talked about equitable between Conard and Hall.
Because Hall definitely gets.
17.4 was the
So
number.
Hall gets 4 more classes a year than Conard does.
So how does a
Point 2, 4 classes. Each class is a point 2. So it equals 0.8, there's a 0.78 because the pay rate shifts it because of retirement issue, but that's
over
basically what it fits.
1,500 students, that's,
Over the entirety of all of our courses. It's just you've built in that one school gets more classes than the other one. Yeah, okay. 33% free and reduced lunch versus 19% free and reduced lunch. So that's, I
I'm
mean, so
asking,
I
you
could
said 4
argue that
classes.
the other one should get more. But we don't do that because we're equitable.
no, you said, I'm just asking, you said it was 4, I'm not talking about
It's
free and
4
reduced.
classes.
It's 4 full-time classes.
It's 4 classes, yeah, that's what 0.8 is, it's 4
So
classes.
let me, to think of it this way, let's just say for sake of argument, both high schools had 100 teachers. And those 100 teachers taught 5 classes each, that's 500 classes. Hall would get 504, Conard would get 500. So yeah, it's small potatoes, but I can do a lot with 4 extra classes relative to averaging out my class sizes to be smaller in grade 9, having a couple extra co-tots over here, so I know that Dan and Julio would gladly say, you give me as many extra classes as you want until it becomes significant in the budget, but, but I understand your point, but it's big and it's small at the same time.
Thank you. And I appreciate this process, by the way. And if you get to know me, I have a very thick skin, so don't, throw facts at me. And if I'm wrong, I'm happy. So there we go. What was my recollection of the process, having gone through it, I've recommended kids to ask, I've received kids from ask, was that, if a kid failed at a tier 1 intervention, did not work over, let's say, a 6-week period, and I needed help. We had an in-house tier 2 intervention program, which is rare across the state, by the way. Most schools don't have the luxury of having tier 2 in my experience. There are some. So what I'm seeing, and again, tell me if I'm wrong, is that here are my options. Now the tier 2 program is gone, and it's not in-house, and that kid either goes back into the regular education classroom, or he could go to our amazing program that we heard about across at Conard. So his day then, instead of being a Hall student and participating in Hall sports, would then be getting the bus at his house and going to Reach. And, which is great.
Just to
if he needs
clarify,
that.
he's still a Hall student, he still participates in Hall sports.
So he can come back,
Yeah.
which adds to our transportation budget. So
No, we're having that budget anyway. They're going there. And
I'm just worried that we're not going to steal
But it's
from
not,
Paul
they're
to
not
pay Peter,
Conard students. They're at, the Reach building happens to be held on the Conard campus.
I know.
That's the issue.
My concern
But I
is
guess to
that-
go back to one thing, you said we have the luxury. Okay, the rest of this budget, I wasn't able to include luxuries.
No, I understand. This is tough, and I don't want to play semantics. I mean, we are fortunate. We have I pick whatever word you want. I guess my point is that if we have, let's say, a 0.78 at Hall, and then we need to send 6, 10, 12, argue about it all day, whatever the number is, to Reach, and we have to transport them there, pick them up at their house, bring them to Conard, pay for the transportation, bring them back to play lacrosse, soccer, baseball. Are we just going to end up at like a 20,000 difference and we lose a tier 2 program in-house? That's my big concern here, if we're just looking at numbers. And again, we've got 2 guys coming in with no health insurance. So it's like, yes, we can probably milk these guys for a few more years because, again, he's very close to, I thought he was going to retire 10 years ago, to be honest, but he's still here.
So
That's my concern. Will we lose a tier 2 program over $20,000?
I'll be happy to
That's
answer.
my concern.
Let us answer.
Sorry.
So first and foremost, I really am going to strip away tier 2 from that. It's tier 3. What you're really saying, the one point that I grant you 100%, it's the difference between on campus for a tier 3 or off campus for a tier 3. But it is a tier 3. The fact that they do remain a Hall student, students right now under our current design and Reach can still take a class at Hall in the morning. We do still, there's a bus that brings students back every day. They can do athletics at Hall. They can do after-school activities at Hall, be it the play, the musical. They get a Hall diploma at the end of the day. So
that, sir,
I guess my concern isn't what will they be labeled as, it's what will they feel like.
understood. And I think that is the difference when, if I am looking, if my needs are such that I am a concern for dropout prevention, it's a question of, am I remaining on campus or am I moving to off campus? We have plenty of tier 2 supports. I'm going to cheat on Gretchen's got notes in terms of things we offer, to include tutoring, content-specific support classes. We work with our counseling staff to do changes in schedules and potentially selective scheduling, which essentially is what we're doing within the ASK program, some selective scheduling. We can still do that at Hall with other exceptional teachers as needed. Check-ins and check-outs with teachers, with administrators, with clinicians, with counselors. Other non-mandated services before and after school programming to help get kids ready, help deal with issues, things of that nature. Do groups, executive functioning classes that are offered both to mandated and non-mandated students. Reading interventions, working with our reading specialists. The writing lab at Hall. Those are all tier 2 interventions. And those are all accessible to any student at Hall. Those would all be accessible to the kids. What's different here is some delivery of content and being able to have Jim Solomon. So if we're trying to budget for being able to have Jim Solomon, which, mind you, is an exceptional experience to have, certainly, but it's, but to me that's the luxury. Being able to have an on-campus program versus a program that is not located on your campus. And that's just a matter of geography. I get it. I get that this town has 2 high schools, and that what high school you go to, I still think of myself as a Plainville Blue Devil. So, when you leave that campus, it's a kind of a scary thing. But I would take the testimonials of students that when they've done that, every one of them says they were kind of concerned about it, and one of 2 things happens. If Reach does not end up to be the right place for them, they buck up, they figure out, and we figure out what we need to do to support them back at their home school, be it Conard or Hall. But the majority of the Reach kids, once they're there, say, I was nervous about it at the beginning, but boy, it was the right move for me, and it has made an exceptional difference in my life. And that's, we're not going at this because we don't like Jim Solomon. We're, and I know you're not saying that. We're going at this. We have a way, an efficient way, and a cost-effective way to program for students' needs through existing programming. The trade-off is, to your point, I can't deny. Whether at Conard or Hall, students have to get over the fact that in order to access that at a tier 3 level, they would need to change the physical location in their campuses. We have the same problem with Conard kids, keeping them out of the building, as opposed to taking them from a building.
Thank you. Looking forward, again, I'm worried about losing a program, not so much the person. I like him, but he'll be fine. He'll be fine. I'm not worried about the person. I'm worried about, because once you lose something in-house, it's very hard to get it back. So is there an option for, let's say you want to go to Reach, you meet the requirements, to attend, let's say 1 or 2 classes at Hall, take a bus together over to save money? Because my understanding is that, I think from the presentation, is that all those students get picked up at their houses, and I want to make sure that they feel like they're part of the school culture, and that that if they are a Hall student, they feel like they're at Hall. And if they get a bus back to play sports, that we do, 1, to save money, because as far looking at the budget, this transportation was a huge increase, and picking up let's say 20 additional students, or 6 or 10 at their homes seems like it would be pricey. And again, going with the student experience, I think it'd be great.
We do have the opportunity right now, and we have, where students can take a period 1 class at Hall. I'll need to check with Shelley. I don't want to say something that's inaccurate, because I want to say that we have some students that may go back period 8, but I don't want to be inaccurate on that. There's no transportation increase. None of the transportation increases because of Reach. This is part of the Reach program, has been a part of the Reach program.
So just to clarify, those students who are taking the first period class at Hall are getting on a bus together and going to the REACH program, and then at the end of the day, getting on a bus together and going back to Hall.
Correct. They do the normal transportation like any Hall student to go to Hall in the morning, and that would be then the path.
I think I'm good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Are there other questions on REACH? Or is it the will of the, I'm sorry. Let me ask again. Are there other questions on ask, or is it the will of the body to move on? All right, let's go on to the next page.
All right. Turning ahead to 72 and 73. Regular instruction system-wide, there are no staffing changes, nor are there programmatic changes. Oh, I'm sorry.
He stole my thunder. There are no programmatic changes.
I'm just trying to save time here.
And because of that, there are no notable budget changes either.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, let's move on.
Page 81, D81, 82 and 83 is the supervision of instruction for regular instruction. And again, remember that this is separate from supervision for special education, which we will get to in a moment. So for principals, we had a 1.0 increase from our adopted to our current, as a principal is on special assignment to develop our coding curriculum as part of our coding initiative that was supported by the board this year. This position does not reoccur in 2021, resulting in a reduction of 1.0. Department supervisors, we have a 1.6 decrease from the current to our budget, as department supervisors are assigned to teach one class in this budget. And secretaries, we had a 1.0 increase from adopted 1920 to current 1920, as a paraprofessional position was reclassified to a secretary at King Philip Middle School.
So programmatically, really the major change is the department supervisors moving this year to teach one class. We have several of our department supervisors here in our audience, and I want to thank them both for being here and for their leadership and what they do. They are invaluable members of our leadership team overall. And so their movement to teaching one class is certainly not an insignificant change, but neither is it one without precedent. In fact, right up until this current year, we had several of our supervisors that were still teaching a class. As an exec team, we took a lot of time to examine this, and there are lots of things for us to consider on it, but we unanimously agree that the value that's added to our schools, to our students' experience, and to their position in terms of the connection that will make with students is invaluable to make teaching a part of the day. But we certainly recognize that that's a big shift, and there's going to be a need for us to look at and how do we balance that and make that work so that we can continue the exceptional work that they do relative to our leading curriculum and our professional development.
I do want to note, I'd be remiss, and I don't want to mislead in any way, because they didn't communicate with you. They communicate directly with me because that's the channels. They're not pleased with this. Their union has made it clear that the union's position isn't pleased with this. They disagree. That's fine. That's honest disagreement. I appreciate that they communicated directly with me in that letter and with our executive team. Again, much like previously, the executive team is unified, and I don't want to speak for you if anybody disagrees, that this is the appropriate movement going forward.
So Tom, you mentioned, or I'm sorry, Paul, that some supervisors taught before, as of right now, today?
So
And now
there's
this
a
is
long
not a
long
huge-
history I can give you.
Well, I don't want a long history.
I'll keep it short.
I just want the facts, sir. No,
All right.
Just if they have taught, and
And
then if
teaching.
this is not a new option,
Many of our supervisors have not taught in recent years. When Bristow came online, here's the condensed version. It used to be for most of recent history, department supervisors at one point taught 2 classes. That was the model under which I was a department supervisor. I taught 2 classes. When Bristow came online, the 2 classes was reduced to 1, and then eventually that 1 class was reduced to 0. When for the supervisor who had responsibility at Bristow, and their counterpart would have taught 1. When we got new curriculum and we were really ramped up with the Common Core back in 2010, there was enough curriculum work going on that we reduced math and English so that they didn't teach, because they had a significant amount of curriculum rewriting to do and just loads and loads of professional development. As we've moved forward over the years, we did not reinstitute that because there's been plenty of things such as the new SRBI processes and so on and so forth, to where there's lots of there's more work in education than any one person can ever do, and that's where we've been weaning off. Even this last year, we've had some significant work that we wanted to do within the CTE program. So they were one of the last ones to have the teaching removed, because we were looking to push some things forward in that department. So movement back to teaching for our content area supervisors to 1, we will need to look to say how do we rebalance so that we can keep things on a level playing field. But again, there is a conversation that we've had collectively to say, certainly there's a financial impetus to looking at this during this time, but we don't want to make a decision based on finances alone. We want to say, do we believe that our instructional leaders should be teaching in terms of being able to model what effective teaching is, and how does that keep you grounded as a supervisor? So there's definitely benefit to that we think is important, and now we have our responsibility to say, okay, how do we rebalance everything else?
Let's have Liz go ahead and finish the impact.
Oh, that's not a problem. So from a budget standpoint, the fluctuations that we see are consistent with our staffing changes. You can see that our department supervisor salary line, account number 5111, is reduced in accordance with the reduction in FTEs. And you'll also see an increase in account 5115, which is our secretary's account, as the paraprofessional was reclassed. As we look at our purchase services, which goes on to the next page, you'll see overall for a subtotal increase of 2.6%. It's primarily fluctuations within lines. The only notable increase is our textbook line, which we are putting back up to more historical levels. You can see the actual for 2019 was approximately $134,000. It was dropped in the current year adopted budget, and we are going back up based upon our needs for textbooks. The only other line item that has a significant variance is our equipment. That is programmed for replacement classroom and office furniture for schools across the district.
So quick question first. Can you just explain why having a department supervisor teach a class reduces the FTEs for department supervisors as opposed to reducing the FTEs for teachers?
So the way that we generally do it is we classify them based on the activity that they are performing. So if a department supervisor is teaching a class, we classify them as 0.8 of a department supervisor and 0.2 of a teacher. In effect, what actually happens is as the department supervisor teaches a class, we reduce our teaching staff.
So budgetarily, you're right, Deb, it's just a matter of placement.
But it's
how we account for the staffing piece.
And it's because we're trying to reflect the actual work that they are performing, that they're, spending 80% of their time as the department supervisor, and in this case, 20% of their time actually teaching in the classroom.
Thank you. And then what does their salary reflect? Are they still paid at the supervisor level, or is it a blend of teaching and supervising?
They're still paid at the supervisor level.
And then, thank you.
No,
And then my third question is, would this apply to all department supervisors across all departments, or are there certain supervisors that would not be teaching a class?
This applies generally to our content area supervisors with a couple of exceptions. within, so it's English, math, social studies, science, world language, and career and technical education. Those that would not be teaching at this point are our music department supervisor. Our art department supervisor technically already teaches, so that's not a change. And our school counseling, obviously, and our physical education and health. Now with physical education, health, and music, one of the main drivers for us there is if we were to limit their available time, it would have an undue influence on our elementary supervision. So the idea that they're K-12 versus English, math, science, social studies, not world language, are 6-12, that sort of gives us a little bit more flexibility with our evaluation.
Thank you. Other questions on this item? Sean?
Thanks. Well, thank you for, I really like the idea of a department supervisor teaching a class. I've seen them teach up to 2. As you mentioned, I think it connects them to the people that they're leading, and little things of knowing how many textbooks we need for next year, to the state of the classrooms, to what their teachers might be going through in a particular day. I really like the idea. I enjoyed watching former supervisors teach. I love the idea. I was hoping it would be a cost saving, but I was a little surprised to hear that it doesn't reduce, so that's a little confusing.
So no, it's still a cost saving.
Well, I mean, sorry to rephrase, what I meant to say is I hope this would be a way to free up some more FTEs and not dig into the teachers because of them.
Yeah, the cost savings you realize are in the teacher salaries for the classes they offset. So when you total up the number of sections and translate that into the number of teachers, you're saving on the teacher salary end versus their salary. We're not gonna pay them less, but you're gonna save because you're gonna have sections fewer of teaching from teachers.
Right. Well, I know it's a difficult decision, so thank you.
Other questions on this item? Or anything else on this page? Rob?
Just clarification, Tom. So you said, just so I heard it right, that there is some pushback on this, and is there any, how does that work contractually? I don't know if that's an HR question as far as like if we support this change and we vote in, like is there any chance that it becomes an issue where we're,
They can ask for it to go to bargaining, but it's clear
Yeah.
in the contract because it's happened before. We've done it before.
Okay.
So that's something lawyers could talk about, but I feel very confident in this position.
We reviewed that, and it's consistent with our contract for administrators.
It just, not being a teacher, just from a management perspective, it makes a lot of sense because you have to sharpen your tool. A lawyer that doesn't practice lawyering, legalese, and a doctor that doesn't practice, that's why they call it practice, and the same thing. Someone that hasn't taught in 15, 20 years, it's a perishable skill, but yet they're supervising that. So I find this to be actually a very good thing, both for our students, our faculty, and West Hartford. So I think it's a win-win.
I have to ask, is there a reason did you start with the idea of 2, settle with 1, or were you aiming for 1? And was there any reasoning behind not going for 2? Just curious.
We feel that 1 actually meets the needs as we've outlined, as far as having that, as Mark said, having that classroom experience as a leader, and 2 we felt develops and impinges more on some of the other supervisory duties that we've asked department supervisors to do.
Thank you. I really like that. That's why they call it practice. So I may have to borrow that one. Thank you. All right, let's forge ahead. Thank you.
All right, foraging ahead. We are on turning the tab to E5 and E6. You could say goodnight to Paul for the evening as we turn over to Gretchen for programmatic changes. This is always an exciting time in the night. For staffing changes for special instruction, we have, under the Intensive Behavioral Support Program, a 0.5 increase from current 1920 to budget 2021 to meet the needs, to meet the changes in graduation requirements at Strive. In our resource program, we have a 0.5 increase from adopted to current based on student needs at the high school level. And our Early Learning Center has a 0.5 increase from adopted 2019 to 20 to current based on student needs in the preschool program.
So at Strive, we have an abbreviated day there, and the students have been taking courses at Strive and meeting their credit requirements without a problem. The abbreviated day certainly meets other needs in that particular population. Paul's done some amazing work with us and has realized that we would not be able to sustain and earn enough credits with the new credit requirements under the current program format. So in order to do that, we have a current special ed teacher right now who is a 0.5. She is certified both as a school counselor and a special ed teacher, and she would be increasing at a 0.5 level to a 1.0 to offer health, to make sure that we are providing appropriate career readiness training and a full spectrum of the school counseling curriculum, as well as satisfying an arts requirement. So it will definitely help with the credit requirements and also some other needed areas of support at Strive. So that's what that 0.5 would achieve.
And to be fully transparent, we will need to, in next year's budget, look to add a 0.2 in for world language. We currently don't deliver world language at the Strive program, but we felt we could move that in the following year.
So resource. I've worked over the last couple of years to make sure that our staffing grid is accurate and accurately reflects where our teachers are. We have a number of teachers that work at the district level, multi-schools, multi-buildings. And so in order to make this as accurate as possible, we see shifts. Over the course of this year, we needed to add up to 0.5, 0.1, 0.2 here and there in order to meet student needs. You know, as I've explained to you before, over the last few years, we've had an incredible increase in the number of students that are moving into our district with IEPs. And so this year, we've already had over 75 students move in with IEPs. And so in order to meet those caseload thresholds and meet the needs of students this year, we've had to add FTEs here and there in order to keep up with the amount of services that are required. So that's where that increase came in this year. At ELC, very similarly, we see an increase in the number of students. We're looking at a very big jump for next year, but this year we needed to put in another 0.5 teacher there because of the intensity of services needed in some of our 3 and 4-year-old programs, and the requirement for some 4-year-olds to go to full-day programming from half-day programming in order to meet their needs and do the best that we can to help prepare them for kindergarten year. So that's where those increases came in.
And from a budgetary standpoint, the fluctuation you see is consistent in our teacher salary line with the increase in FTEs of 1.5 FTE, as Gretchen just explained. As we look at the other line items in this division, one of the areas where we see a significant increase is in our tuition line. You'll see that we have an increase of approximately $680,000. Or 15%. Tom had talked about this quite a bit during his presentation. We are seeing what's that noise?
That is feedback. There you
Okay.
go. People have their
I
mics.
thought I could hear angels singing or something.
What noise?
Thank you, Deb.
Yeah.
It's just me.
Yeah, it's just you.
Am I sweating too? Do I need to? Yeah. As I was saying, the increase that we're seeing is an increase both in the number of students that we are outplacing to meet their needs, as well as an increase in the overall costs. So for the upcoming year, we are budgeting that we will outplace approximately 88 to 90 students. Still here? At an estimated cost of approximately $100,000 per student. We do receive an excess cost reimbursement from the state. That kicks in once we have incurred expenses equal to 4.5 times our per pupil expenditures. We are then reimbursed at a set rate from the state. Overall, the appropriation at the state is capped And so we find out each year what we will be receiving. But at this point, we're budgeting it at a consistent 65%.
Questions on these items?
Sometimes it's, might be better to go all the way through special ed. Like if questions come up after each page, it's fine, but sometimes it's after the holistic at the end to go to Gretchen. Yeah, there's
Just
a bunch of them.
yeah, I'm
We're
seeing
just
that.
getting
Sorry.
started with special ed.
I do have a question on this page, actually.
okay.
The Early Learning Center, how long of a day is that? And you had mentioned maybe needing to go up to a full day. So what are they at right now?
So right now, a half-day program is about 2.5 hours, and so students can either be in a morning session or an afternoon session, and it's 4 days a week. And so the determination on whether or not a student needs a full-day programming really has to do with the level of support that they need and that is required by their IEP. So if we have a student that needs intensive academic work, referred to as DTI or, highly technical types of programming. In addition to that, they need a number of related services, speech and language, OT, PT. In order to fit all those IEP hours in, we need a full day. We are seeing an increased need for students, very intense IEPs. We also see the need for programming for more students on the autism spectrum. And so at some point, I will be coming to you through Tom and asking you for support, because I do believe that a full day programming is for 4-year-olds is appropriate. There are other districts that are moving in that direction, and that will be good information for me to share with you as we move forward.
I'm glad you asked. If I could, just quick, this is one of those things. Full day programming for 4-year-olds is something Gretchen wants, and frankly, I want it too. And she says she will be advocating. Trust me, she's been advocating for it all year, and I didn't put it in. And that's why there's times when the budget feels like I've made, and this is your job, so I'm not, the superintendent's budget that I went forward, I couldn't put that in because of the cost this year. I believe it's going to be in there soon, because I believe it's going to be at the very least mandated, and it was basically the last thing not put in the budget this year. So it's certainly on the tracks to be coming down.
So the kids who need the full day right now, how do they get that full day? Do they stay for both sessions, morning and
Yes.
afternoon?
They stay for both sessions. We do some minimal programming on Wednesdays as well. The majority of ELC is not operational, and that's when teachers are doing all of their work and their prep and things like that. It takes an extraordinary amount of time to prep for preschoolers, and the complexity of their needs. So we are able to do the best that we can, which is why, I have that 0.5 increase in there.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item or this page?
I just wanted to say, I would love in the future, not anytime soon because we're a little busy, to talk to you and to hear a presentation on something related to what you were just talking about for 4-year-olds. The work done at Whiting Lane is amazing. My daughter went through it. She's kind of still in it. And I think a full day program would actually save us costs in other areas, because we're sending these buses with 4-year-olds on them all over the place back and forth for itinerant services. So it'd be interesting to see if we do a full day, would we save, obviously not for the whole price of the program, but there's this gap of from birth to 3 to the start at 5, and there's kids that need that help in West Hartford. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to turn to 21 and 22.
Sorry, can I add one thing to that? I totally forgot. It wasn't what he just said. I would actually prefer, though, to see if the state would be interested in a birth to 5. I've heard that they were in a birth to 5 program before we jump in head first, because obviously it's going to be expensive. And I've heard rumors that they are. Have you heard anything about a birth to 5 program?
Just the opposite.
Thanks.
Related services, staffing changes. We have a 0.3 increase from adopted to current based on student needs. a 1.0 increase from current to budget to support students at the elementary and middle school levels for social work. Psychologists see a 0.2 decrease from adopted to current based on the need for service. Speech language therapists, a 0.4 net increase from adopted to current with variances at each level to align for student needs, a 0.5 position funded via grant, and a decrease of 1.0 in the general fund. PT and OT has a 0.2 increase to address occupational therapy needs, and nurses, we are going ahead and budgeting for a 0.5 increase from current to budget to support the increased enrollment at the post-secondary program and the need for more nursing staff there as well.
Okay, so like I explained in the in my last commentary, we've been shifting our lanes and in order to more accurately reflect how our staff members are categorized. And the social worker and the psychologist position actually kind of cancel themselves out because we had a school psychologist that was functioning as a social worker, and when she retired, we replaced her with a social worker position. So they're really, for the most part, except for a 0.1, that kind of canceled themselves out. In terms of the speech and language therapist, yes, we've had to add a 0.1, a 0.2 FTE here and there to adjust for caseloads for the students that are moving in. We also see our SLP team particularly stressed with new referrals. And so those are referrals of students new to our district or students within our district. And so with the incredible work that we're doing with dyslexia, that we are partnering through curriculum instruction on, we're seeing an increased request for referrals around dyslexia as well. And our speech and language pathologists are actively involved in that work. PT and OT, we did have 2 students move into one non-program school with significant OT needs, and again, without the large staff that we typically have at a program school, there was a need to add a day a week at that school. And the need for the nursing increase next year, we are going to go from 33 students in our post-secondary program to 47, potentially 48 next year, and that's a significant jump, and also in the complexity of the students that are joining. We have a number of students who are medically fragile and who have significant medical needs. So not only will the nurse increase at the post-secondary, but she will or he will actually move over to where the post-secondary students are to have very close proximity to those students who need nursing care.
I was just going to comment, I'm actually surprised that there's a decrease in psychologists, given all of the move-ins for special ed. I'm just thinking triennials and testing, because that's who does the testing.
Yeah, it wasn't actually a decrease. We have the same services. It was just a psychologist that was functioning in the role of a social worker. So she wasn't, but she was paid as a psychologist. So no, actually we're reallocating job functions next year, and we will actually have more options for testing. So again, reallocation within my budget helps a lot.
Let's move to Liz.
The fluctuations that you see in the recommended budget are consistent with the changes we've been talking about, an increase in pupil services salaries and nursing salaries to reflect the overall increase in FTEs. The other thing that you'll see in this related service area is an increase in our computer software and some of our equipment expense, and that goes to support digital learning, which I think is a new focus or an increased focus for Gretchen and her staff.
We actually made a significant investment last year in a digital online assessment system. So all of our teachers and our related service people have iPads that they're doing all of their assessments on, and this will eventually be a cost savings for us, because in the past we've had to, every time a test was a new edition came out, we would have to buy all new test protocols, paper protocols again, and it was quite costly and there was a lag time. And so with this, they're automatically updated and it's a much easier scoring process. So that accounts for some of that as well.
All right, let's move on ahead.
All right. Feels like we're headed into the home stretch here. We are on page 33 and 34. Supervision of instruction. There are no staffing changes. And there are no program changes, if I can speak for Gretchen.
That's okay. But there are some budget changes, and you'll see those if we look particularly at account numbers 5117 and 5185. We have made an increase to our paraprofessional salaries. Excuse me. And Lorna, we had talked earlier that while we did decrease the paraprofessionals in regular education, we do see the need to increase our staffing to support our special education needs. So we're doing that with both paraprofessionals and teacher assistants, and you see both of those increases here. It's noteworthy that in our paraprofessional line, we also have funding for registered behavioral techs, I believe 4 or 5 of them, consistent with the current year actual. The other thing that you will see is a significant increase in our professional and technical services. That's account number 5319. Tom spent some time talking about this when he did his presentation. These are services that we incur for independent evaluations, psychiatric consultant services, testing, interpreters, etc. And we have seen both the need and the cost for those increase over the past year. So that increase reflects what we anticipate our need in the upcoming year to be. The only other item noteworthy is in our equipment, we have a small increase. It looks like a large increase percentage-wise, but it's less than $5,000. But it's for additional laptop requirements that we have for this division.
Any questions?
All right, great. We now move to page F2 and F5. General support services. Give everyone a chance to flip their tabs. All right, so for general support services, for maintenance workers, we have an elimination of 1.0 maintenance worker position that is currently vacant from the current 1920 to budgeted 2021, and special funding for a 1.0 benefit specialist, which is transferred from the general fund to the risk management fund. I'll let Liz explain the budget changes for those.
Very good. So this page covers really all of our support services. So as you can see on the workshop summary that I've handed out, I've detailed numerous accounts and the fluctuations there. So I was just going to run through them one by one, but please feel free to ask questions as we go if you have any. As Andy had mentioned with the salaries, we are changing our general fund funding by 2 positions. You'll see the maintenance worker reduction in account 5150. That's a painter. It's a position that's currently vacant that we will not be refilling. With regard to the benefit specialist, you will see that reduction in account 5115. The person who's in this position, or the position itself, works solely on our health program, which is funded through our risk management fund. So it's really a more proper allocation of the salary of that position to go to the risk management fund. So it's not a decrease in staffing levels, just a funding mechanism. The other noteworthy change that you will see is an account for salaries is an account 5112, our teacher salaries. That looks like a large percentage increase. The person in that position handles all of our, I guess they call him a webmaster.
Yes, it's the webmaster stipend.
And that used to be in each of the individual schools. We have consolidated that, so overall not an increase, but it looks like a large percentage here. The other item that affects our salaries is account number 5190. That's our deferred compensation. You'll see that there's an increase this year. That's a function of new non-certified personnel who are hired are now participating in our hybrid pension program. So they get a reduced pension benefit, but we do a match to their contributions to their 457 plan. So as we continue to hire new people, we see an increase in that.
Questions?
I do have questions in this in general. when it comes to things like, this is where my eye is going. Professional technical services, like you explained in other areas. Communications, I no longer have questions about mileage allowances. I'm assuming it's because gas has gone up and people are traveling greater distances for things. But when it comes to recruitment activities and printing and binding, when you do recruitment activities, are you thinking about does that have to do with marketing and staff recruitment and those kinds of things?
Yes, that's the career fairs, those are the recruitment efforts that we put forward, but that with both materials and actual, the participation itself.
Okay, because just because of the work that I do when I'm in and out of school districts in our region, and I'm looking at some of these things with their plans, I see whether it's excess food in meetings that's getting ordered just because, or high expensive ads that, I know that based on our per pupil expenditure, we're lean and working lean, but these are the areas that pretty consistently across the board when I go into different districts, the marketing budget and some of those pieces do tend to be higher. So how are you deciding how some of that spending, when we're looking at areas for savings, when people are marketing for new positions, whether it's HR or other things that have to do with recruitment?
That's really more of a question, I think that, we can certainly get specifics from Rick on that as far as the recruitment piece, but I can assure you that we're not spending it on food and other materials for that. It's directly into his recruiting efforts.
And it's really,
HR.
Recruiting includes advertisements.
Right, and that's what
So it's not just that, it's advertisements and the career fair. And, the online system we
Yeah.
have where we have to register for the online system. That's the other piece. Thanks, Rick.
The one thing that we do, in West Hartford, is a destination district for employment also, so there's somewhat of a reduced need for that, for marketing to go out and at different levels.
Yeah, I wouldn't really look at it as much as marketing, but there's shortage areas still. Like if we have business CT, it's difficult to find. We're actively recruiting minority teaching candidates. So that's a part that goes into this that's not, that has to be in there also. So, yeah, this isn't like, this isn't a food fund or anything like that. 20 years ago, from what I hear before I was up here, they used to have catering trucks and nice meals. That's gone. That does not happen up here. That's
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
And with printing and binding, as we went through the different sections, it doesn't look like we're really overstaffed in any of that. It looks like there's a couple of people who work on that for different departments.
So the printing and binding line itself has to do with all of our copiers and paper and all of that.
Yeah.
We do have personnel who work as printers. We have two.
It looks,
work
yeah,
in the
which
print
seems
shop.
lean for this.
It is.
Correct.
They handle
Okay.
everything for the board, and they actually, we charge the town as well if the town wants any projects done.
Okay, that was what I was wondering, because some of those shifts that have been done in-house
Mhm.
versus out-of-house in different districts, there's been a lot of savings there, and it looked like, even though that looks like a high number for our district, that's actually low considering what I typically see in other places. Okay, and then for for things like custodial supplies and maintenance supplies, what are you seeing in those areas? Are you noticing that pricing is changing, or do you have more?
Bleach is getting,
Not in
bleach is
those-
getting more expensive
I'm
next year, I
just
can promise you
wondering-
that.
Just in general, like the flow of those categories as we're looking from year to year.
There's very little change in those over time. As we replace flooring into new flooring, we go ahead and consciously choose products that we know will have not only a longer lifespan, but a cheaper maintenance cost with them as far as equipment and supplies. And so we try to make sure that all balances out over time.
I have to say, looking through all of these pieces in this section, these are lean numbers compared to the size of the district and what I see in other areas. So I appreciated that as we went through these and as I looked at them prior to coming. So thank you.
No, I appreciate that. And you can see also I think we talked a little bit about that before, but you can also see the savings over time that we've put into utilities and the benefit that we're getting from that.
And I do, say it jokingly with bleach, and I don't want to belabor the point, but these are the kind of things, when we have something like this come up right now, that really you just operate, right now, we can't think about money. That's not the priority, you always think about it, but of course, we're going to see spikes in these areas and hope with the emergency declaration, that's the kind of thing that will offset this.
As long as you're buying the generic bleach and not the Clorox. Make sure we're safe.
We're buying any bleach we can.
Yeah, I just think as we go through everything, the things that are not affecting content, kids, and programming, this is obviously the first area that is easy to take a look at. So it was reassuring to go through these.
And as we make decisions and we talk about possible areas to cut back, we try as well as we can to keep everything away from that core instruction, any cuts that we have to make.
The last 2 pages of your workshop summaries go through some of our changes as it relates to benefits and our purchase services for our general support services. Did you want me to run through those, or did you have questions on them? I'm happy to go through line by line if you'd like.
If you could just share the information about the health insurance.
So the health insurance has really been a big success story. We have successfully transitioned everyone to the state partnership plan for the current school year. It was effective 7/1/2019. That was done for several reasons, but one of the main benefits of that is that we've really eliminated the volatility that we used to have with our self-insured program. With our prior program, we were responsible for claims up to a certain stop-loss limit, and based on activity during the year, we would see significant fluctuations, which we would then have to budget for the next year. The state partnership plan is a plan where we pay monthly premiums. They are known costs. We have eliminated that volatility, and it's really allowed us to control our costs and to be able to better predict what we're going to see in the out years. In our roll-forward budget, Tom had mentioned that we had budgeted our medical trend, which is 7%. And we were pleased with that. In talking to the state partnership plan, they've actually come in significantly lower. We've met with them recently, and you'll see that the overall budget, the increase for our health and medical is only 2%. That includes not only our active employees, but that includes our dental. It includes a contribution to our other post-employment benefits to meet our retiree costs. And so overall, just a very successful program all around.
Thank you. Other questions? Sean?
I don't have too much knowledge on this, but should we be concerned about price increases with the state plan? Because I've heard that other parts of the state had higher percentages, like southwestern Connecticut, because of price of doctor's visits and, the practices down there that they offer. Would that come back to hit us, later at some point?
So what's ended up happening is when the state partnership plan started, they had consistent rates across the state. What they found is that wasn't really the best model, and so they developed regional rates. Based on the Hartford County rates, we are actually less than average. So we received, once they figured out what the average increase should be, we received a 2.5% reduction on our rates because of being in Hartford County. Whereas Fairfield County, I don't remember the exact increase, but it was,
a lot.
yeah.
But even if we got whacked by that number, we'd still be below where we were before in terms of planning, so.
Yeah, and the state partnership plan has recently gone out, they go out to bid to see who the vendor's going to be. They've changed to Anthem recently. That's a long-term contract with fixed rates, so we will not see high increases in the upcoming years. They will be measured increases based upon overall claims.
Lorna?
Question regarding transportation. If you can just categorically, can you just define what that is comprised of? So transportation is made up by transportation where?
So it's transportation for regular education students and special education students to and from school, both, morning, late buses, et cetera. And then there's a small portion, only about 4% of the whole budget, that deals with school activities. So getting to sports, those types of things.
So in terms of transportation provided for out-of-district placement, does that fall into that as well?
It does.
And what about transportation for students that are going to private schools in town?
No, that does not. So the town handles that piece of it. They are responsible for covering that cost.
So the town has legislation that they have to provide per student in West Hartford that choose to go to a private school, they have to provide the same cost that it costs to transport a West Hartford student to West Hartford Public Schools. The thing is, we can budget efficiently because we can plan everyone with their buses. The town may only have 2 people going to Kingswood Oxford or Renbrook or whatever. They could just reimburse for the exact same rate. The town does transport all those students to their schools here, so it's actually it's a more expensive program, but it's not reflected at all in our budget. It's reflected in the town budget.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So the last item you'll see on that page is utilities. As Andy mentioned, we've really seen significant reduction in our electric consumption. I've gone back just to look at some figures. In fiscal year 2018, we used 10.3 million kilowatts, and this year our energy specialist is estimating that we'll be down to 9.2 million. So a lot of the investments that we have made in energy conservation projects as it relates to LED lighting or converting steam boilers to hot water have really paid off, and we're seeing the results of that and the corresponding decrease in our budget.
Does that also include solar or no?
Yes, it does.
We get the credits back in our system or something like that?
Yeah, it's like an energy purchase agreement. Correct.
That's what I meant. Thank you.
And then on the last page, we have just the final few items for rentals. As we've discussed, we rented additional space at the American School for the Deaf for our post-secondary program, so we're seeing that increase. That's something that we're doing in the current year, but you see the budget increase next year because it was not budgeted for in full. For our contracted services, we're seeing an increase in information technology as some of our district-wide license agreements are increasing, as is new software for teaching and learning. In maintenance, we're seeing an increase in our outside contractors required, and if you look, that's really consistent with historical experience. That's for things like elevator maintenance, fire alarms, sprinklers, security systems, that type of thing. From a building improvement standpoint, that one account 5621 are being reallocated to equipment purchases within the maintenance division. From an equipment standpoint, the maintenance division has a vehicle fleet, and then they have small equipment needs, and they felt that was a better allocation of those funds. And our last item is computer equipment. In our information technology division, you'll see an increase of approximately $35,000. That addresses some of the needs that were submitted by school principals. Those primarily relate to replacement of computers, Chromebooks and Chromebook carts, as well as iPads, et cetera. And it's part of our adopted refreshment policy. That does not meet all of our needs. There will be things that we will have to prioritize, but it addresses some of the requests.
Thank you. Questions on these items or any other items? Mark?
Yeah, I guess I missed it. I was looking for the line item where we get reimbursed federally for the special.
Tuition?
Well, that tuition, that's not necessarily a line item as far as reimbursement. It's a.
So what we show in the budget is a net item, a net amount. And so for the upcoming year, we are estimating that we'll have 88 to 90 students. It'll be about 100,000 as our average. It really varies anywhere from 40,000 for a student up to as much as 200 or 225, but we use an average of 100,000. We then receive reimbursement from the state if we exceed 4.5 times our standard per pupil rate. And we get a percentage reimbursement on that.
But that's not reflected on the budget?
It is. So what we do is we show the total net, we show the reimbursement coming in, and we're budgeting for the net balance.
Okay, so I guess I missed that.
It's under.
So that is on page E5 and E6. So on page E5, you will see line item 5430, which is tuition. So that's the amount, the budget for the current, or the upcoming year, the 5.2 million is our gross tuition expense. less the amount that we anticipate being reimbursed from the state. So our actual tuition is closer to 8 million. The state reimburses us, it's a direct expense reimbursement, so we offset it against that expenditure line item.
So the 8 million, you're not representing that as a, where's the reimbursement number though? Where, if we're planning on 8 million, we're paying out 5.2.
So basically what happens is I pay out the 8 million, and then the state gives me back, about 3 million, I'm just rounding.
Okay, so that's
And I
the number I was looking
So
for, the
that's
3
what we
million.
I received that
So
during the year.
what did we receive last year, I guess, that's also, because this is a projection. And you just have to do the math to do that, the 3 million, but where's the
Yep.
number? Is it in our financial report?
It's, the net number is in the
I don't remember
financial
it.
report.
See, that's the number I'm looking for, because as a financial examiner, I don't remember
We
it,
can
and it
send
could
it
be
to-
there. I
We
just
can
don't
send
remember
it to all of
We can
you,
get that
Liz
to you.
has it, yeah.
That's what I was looking for, how we get reimbursed and by percentage of, this, I get this, I saw that and I
Yep.
get it, but I was looking for what we got reimbursed last year, what we anticipate being reimbursed this year, and I don't remember ever seeing that in the budget, and as a financial examiner, it could have been there, I just don't remember seeing it, and I don't know where we account for that money.
We'll pull that together and we'll get that to you. We'll
Okay,
get that
that's
to
fine, but
everybody.
where do we account for it? Like, where do we see that?
So what you see is we account for it all in that one line item in the general fund.
Okay.
And so throughout the year, I'm making payments out of that line item to pay all of our various out-of-district schools. I pay
Right.
tuition. And then at 3 points during the year, the state reimburses us
Okay.
for certain costs that are over and above the threshold that's set based on our per pupil expenditure.
No,
So
understood.
we file with the state, and we tell them that for every student, this is how much we think we're gonna spend. They reimburse us, and then we true it up at year end.
Okay, so we don't see that number then?
No, I mean,
Okay.
I have the number, I can give it to you, but when we report it in the financial
Gotcha.
statements, it's
I just
net. because
thinking I
what-
missed something, because I was
No,
a
no.
financial examiner, and I don't remember it.
No,
We never
so-
talked about it.
So what we're trying to represent in our financial statements is the district's net cost, and so we show the gross less what the state reimburses us, so that we're truly saying this is the district's responsibility, and we budget for our cost.
Yeah, but in the financial examiner piece on the grants for the first year and second year, we show a plus when we receive it, and then as we go along, it's a minus as we go.
Not
through.
in
So-
grants,
Not
it's
in the
not a
grants.
grant.
No, understood. I'm just trying to give an example. That example of, like, we see the money come in, and then quarterly or monthly, every other month, we see it go out.
Yep, it definitely is different from the accounting for that, and the only reason that it's different is that it's an expenditure reimbursement. So with the other ones, we get the grant and then we spend it on, within the grant parameters. With this, we first expend the money. The
then
state
we're
says,
getting
I
back.
will reimburse you this portion, and since it's an expenditure reimbursement, it's netted against our gross expenditures.
And it's far more exact than the projection because we bill for everything. We track every student,
dollar.
Gretchen, in the department, every dollar, and we bill back for it. So it rolls as it goes with an exact, not, we're taking a guess what it will be, but during the year it ends up.
Because it's not just tuition, it's also transportation, it's any special services received. If we have a
Supports.
student that has a paraprofessional with them, we bill that. We quantify all of those costs and then request reimbursement.
Yeah, just a detail, I think I.
Of course, I'm happy to.
Just
Can get that to
emailed
you.
or something, just for my own.
Of course.
Other questions? So for process, we have a regular board meeting on Tuesday of next week. The following week on the 25th, right, which is a Wednesday, 2 weeks from today, we'll have a public hearing and then budget workshop number 2. And then finally on April 7th, we will, I think it's April 7th, right? We will adopt a budget. So just to put it out there, at this point, we are still going to have the public hearing, but anyone who's watching this at home, please know you can always email us with your thoughts if you don't feel comfortable coming here for whatever reason. Feel free to email us, and it's very, very easy to email all of us board members at one time by emailing boardmembers@whps.org. And we read all of your emails.
I guess because I'm an old timer, I still have it ingrained in me that this used to be a 2-meeting presentation. We used to go through half on one budget, and we've gotten rid of that, so forgive me, and I forgot to propose something, because our next meeting really is kind of voting and not really changes.
No, we have the workshop.
One more budget workshop, and then after that, you have another meeting
Oh,
where you
okay, so
adopt.
then we used to have 3 meetings then. That was
Yes,
three
correct.
meetings. So we
We
have one
used
more
to-
meeting where we could propose changes.
We used to give Glenn his own meeting.
That's what it was. Was
And
that
we
what it was?
no longer, we no longer do that.
I'm
We
just too
figured
old, I guess. I
Gretchen could
remember
fold
too
right
much.
in at the table.
So at the next budget workshop, we can ask additional questions, we can propose ideas. I also encourage anyone who has ideas to share those with Tom and the team so that they can cost them out if that's what, and give you, the pros and cons, be ready for those ideas to be presented.
Well, seeing everyone, and I understand how busy you guys are with this virus, and we can take the time, instead of throwing it to you last minute, I'll give you the workabout for it, for the second or final meeting. So, what I'm proposing, and I'm gonna touch the stove again, it's because what I do. And I thought, I guess my memory's not working so well as it used to. I thought we had made this change, and I guess we didn't by vote. Currently, the pay-to-play is at $175 per pupil times 4. So it means if you have one kid, you're only really playing three sports because that's all that's offered per year. But if you have multiple kids, you could only pay up to 4, but that's $700. What we used to do is, it used to be 150 times 3, or it might have been 150. It was much lower, 125 even at some point. And, for currently, you pay, these student athletes are paying $700 to play, or a family that has student athletes paying $700 to play a year for sports. And I'm proposing that we look at that and go to 150 times 3 instead of 175 times 4.
I'm sorry.
We can get that.
We have
We'll get
all
that
of
to you
that.
with the offset and the finances, that's easy.
And
Currently,
as
it's
well as-
175
Yep.
times 4,
Yep, and you would like.
150 times 3.
Times 3,
Yeah,
yeah.
we
We've
can
got all
get
that
you that in the
information.
financial
and-
impact.
So it's
That'll be
450
cool.
versus 700.
Yep.
Yep.
And,
We have all that data from, again, when we
Right.
had the discussion 3 years ago.
My memory didn't serve me so correct, apparently.
Just a
Should-
question on that? That's per family, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other comments, I guess we're adjourned for tonight and see you next week. Thank you very much.